The stars looked the same as they had for the past 3 years. Captain Jake Morrison stood on the bridge of his ship, watching distant suns twinkle in the darkness. His vessel, the Harmony's Edge, moved slowly through space like a whale swimming through deep ocean waters. It was not built for war. It was built for exploration, for finding new worlds and meeting new people. Jake had been a ship captain for 15 years. In all that time, he had never fired a weapon in anger. Neither had his father or his grandfather or anyone else in his family for many generations. The last great war had ended 1,000 years ago, and humanity had kept the peace ever since. "Captain, we're getting something on the long-range sensors," said Commander Ben Rogers from his station. Ben was Jake's tactical officer, though there was rarely anything tactical to worry about. Most days, his job involved scanning for asteroids and making sure the ship's path was clear. "What kind of something?" Jake asked, walking over to look at the display screen. Dr. Lisa Parker looked up from her research station. She was the ship's scientist, always studying new forms of life they found on distant planets. "Could be a comet," she suggested. "We're near the edge of this solar system." Ben shook his head. "No, this is different. It's moving in a pattern, not following a natural orbit, and it's sending out some kind of signal." Jake frowned. "Can you clean up the signal? Make it clearer?" Ben worked at his controls for several minutes. The bridge was quiet except for the soft hum of the ship's engines. Finally, the speakers crackled to life with a desperate voice. "Help us! Please! Anyone who can hear this, we are under attack!" They came out of nowhere and started shooting. "We have families on this station." The voice was speaking in Galactic Common, the trade language most species used when talking to each other. Jake had heard it many times during peaceful first contacts with alien races. "Ben, how far away are they?" Jake asked. "About 6 hours at our current speed, Captain." "Maya, can we go faster?" Jake called to his engineer. Maya Johnson looked up from her engine controls. She was young but very skilled with machines. "I can push the engines to double speed, but it might strain the systems." Jake thought for a moment. The Harmony's Edge was an exploration ship, not a military vessel. It had some basic defensive shields and a few energy weapons meant for clearing. Space debris, but nothing designed for real combat. Still, someone was asking for help. "Do it," Jake said. "Ben, keep listening to that signal. Try to figure out what's happening." As the ship sped through space, more details became clear. The station under attack was a small trading post run by the Kalani, a peaceful species that looked like tall, thin birds. They sold supplies to passing ships and had never hurt anyone. The attackers were Zorathians, a warrior race known for taking what they wanted by force. "Captain," Ben said, his voice tight with worry. "I'm reading 5 Zorathian ships around that station. They're armed with plasma cannons and missile launchers. We're going to be seriously outgunned." Jake nodded grimly. "What do we have for weapons?" 2 mining lasers we use for cutting up asteroids, basic energy shields, and our hull is pretty strong," Maya reported. "But those Zorathian ships are built for fighting." Dr. Parker stood up from her station. "Captain, maybe we should call for help. There are other human ships in this sector." "The nearest one is 2 days away," Ben said. "Those people on the station don't have 2 days." Jake looked at his crew. They were scientists and explorers, not soldiers. None of them had ever been in a real fight, but they were human, and humans did not abandon people who needed help. "All right, here's what we're going to do," Jake said. "Maya, I want you to modify those mining lasers. Make them as powerful as you can. Ben, study everything you can about Zorathian fighting tactics. Lisa, see if you know anything about their ship designs that might help us." For the next 4 hours, the crew worked harder than they ever had before. Maya rewired the mining lasers to fire in quick bursts instead of steady beams. Ben found old files about Zorathian battle formations and noticed they always attacked in straight lines. Lisa discovered that Zorathian ships had heavy armor in front but weaker sides. When they finally reached the trading station, the scene was ugly. 3 small Kalani transport ships floated dead in space, their hulls torn open by weapons fire. The station itself was damaged, its outer hull scarred by blast marks. The 5 Zorathian ships circled it like sharks, occasionally firing at the station's weak shields. "This is Captain Morrison of the human vessel Harmony's Edge," Jake announced on the radio. "Stop your attack immediately and withdraw from this area." The response came quickly, full of alien laughter. "Humans, we have heard of your people, soft creatures who have forgotten how to fight. Go away, little ship, before we add you to the wreckage." Jake felt something stir inside him, something that had been sleeping for a very long time. His ancestors had not been soft. They had been warriors who conquered an entire planet, fighting wars that lasted for centuries. Only when they learned to work together had the fighting stopped. But the knowledge, the instincts, the capability, all of that was still there, written in human genes and passed down through stories. "Ben, remember what you learned about their formations," Jake said, quietly. "Maya, are those lasers ready?" "Yes, Captain. They'll cut through most armor now." "Lisa, show me the weak spots on their ships." The first Zorathian vessel came at them just as Ben had predicted, straight ahead, trying to ram them while firing its front guns. But Jake ordered a sudden turn, to the side, and Maya's modified lasers tore into the enemy ship's flank where the armor was thin. The Zorathian ship spun away, trailing atmosphere and debris. The other 4 ships attacked together, trying to surround the human vessel. But Jake had been studying the tactical files during the flight, reading about battles fought centuries ago by his own species. He knew tricks that the Zorathians had never seen before. The Harmony's Edge moved like a dancer, spinning and diving through space in patterns that seemed random, but were actually carefully planned. The Zorathian ships, built for straight line, combat could not keep up. One by one, Maya's lasers found their weak spots. One by one, they fell. When the last Zorathian ship limped away into the darkness, Jake opened a channel to the trading station. "This is Captain Morrison. Are you all right in there?" The Kalani station master's voice was filled with wonder. "Captain Morrison, we cannot thank you enough. We thought we were going to die. How did you defeat 5 warships with an exploration vessel?" Jake looked at his crew. Ben was grinning with excitement. Maya was checking her laser modifications with pride. Dr. Parker was already scanning the area to make sure no one else was hurt. "We remembered something we had almost forgotten," Jake said. "We remembered what humans can do when they need to." Far away on the bridge of the damaged Zorathian flagship, War Chief Vextar watched the recordings of the battle. His ship had barely escaped, and he had lost 4 vessels to a single human exploration ship. His officers were silent, ashamed of their defeat. But Vextar was thinking. The human ship had been fast and clever, but it had taken damage. His sensors showed that their shields had failed twice during the fight, and their hull had been hit several times. They were skilled, but they were not invincible. More importantly, his intelligence report said that humans had been at peace for 1,000 years. They had no military, no weapons of war, no appetite for fighting. If this ship was the best they could do, then maybe the reports were wrong. Maybe humans were not as weak as everyone thought. Or maybe, Vextar thought with growing excitement, this was just one lucky ship with a clever captain. Maybe the rest of humanity really was as soft as the reports claimed. Maybe this was the perfect time to test them. He began planning an invasion. The message from Captain Morrison reached Earth in less than 3 hours. The quantum communication network that connected all human worlds carried news faster than any ship could travel. In the Capitol building of New Geneva, President Ellen Carter read the report twice before calling an emergency meeting. The council chamber filled quickly with the most important people in human government. These were not young politicians hungry for power. They were older, wiser people who had spent their lives keeping the peace that their ancestors had worked so hard to build. "Ladies and gentlemen," President Carter said as she stood at the head of the long table, "we may be facing our first real threat in 1,000 years. General Patricia Stone was the first to speak. She had been retired for 5 years, enjoying her garden and her grandchildren. But when the emergency call came, she put on her uniform and answered the summons. "Madam President, what exactly are we dealing with?" President Carter activated the large screen on the wall. It showed a map of human space, with hundreds of star systems marked in blue. At the edge, near the rim worlds, a red dot pulsed where Captain Morrison had fought the Zorathian ships. "The Zorathians tested us," she said. "They attacked a civilian trading post to see how we would respond. Captain Morrison drove them off, but his ship took damage. Intelligence suggests they may be planning something larger." Dr. Richard Lane, the keeper of humanity's military history, adjusted his glasses and opened a thick file. He was a thin man with gray hair who spent his days in the archives below the Capitol, studying wars that ended before his grandfather was born. "The Zorathians are a warrior culture," he explained. "They've conquered 12 star systems in the past 50 years. They respect strength and despise weakness. If they think we're soft, they'll keep pushing until we prove otherwise, Commander." Alex Turner, head of the exploration fleet, leaned forward. "How many ships do they have?" "Our best estimate is around 500 warships," Dr. Lane replied. "They're allied with 11 other aggressive species in something called the Galactic Trade Union. Together, they could field over 1,000 ships." The room fell silent. Everyone knew that humanity had fewer than 100 exploration vessels scattered across dozens of star systems. None of them were built for war. "What about our defenses?" asked General Stone. Commander Turner shook his head. "We have orbital platforms around major worlds, but they're designed for traffic control and asteroid defense. Our ships have basic weapons for clearing space debris. That's about it." President Carter walked to the window and looked out at the peaceful city below. Children played in parks while their parents worked in offices and laboratories. No one carried weapons. No one expected war. For 1,000 years, humanity had built a civilization based on the idea that fighting was a thing of the past. "Dr. Lane," she said without turning around, "tell me about Protocol 7. The old historian opened another file, this one marked, with symbols that most people had forgotten how to read. Protocol 7 was created after the resource wars ended. It was designed as a way to mobilize our entire civilization for war, if such a thing ever became necessary again. "Has it ever been tested?" General Stone asked. "Never. Not once in 1,000 years." President Carter turned back to face the council. "What would happen if we activated it?" Dr. Lane looked uncomfortable. "Honestly, we don't know. The protocol was written by people who had just lived through the worst war in human history. They built it to be automatic, comprehensive, and effective." "Effective how?" "Every human world, every ship, every station would receive orders to prepare for total war. Manufacturing would switch from civilian goods to military equipment. Scientists would focus on weapons research. Citizens would be organized into support roles." General Stone frowned. "Our people haven't fought a war in 1,000 years. They don't know how." "They don't need to know how," Dr. Lane said quietly. "The knowledge is still there. Every human child learns history in school. They study the great battles, the famous generals, the strategies that won wars. They learn it so they won't repeat the mistakes of the past. But the information is all there, waiting." Commander Turner stood up and walked to the star map. "Our exploration ships are spread thin, but they're well built. Each one can operate independently for years. They have advanced sensors, powerful engines, and crews trained to solve problems under pressure." "But can they fight?" President Carter asked. "Captain Morrison's crew just proved they can. Give them time to prepare and they might surprise us all." The president looked around the table at the faces of people who had spent their entire lives keeping peace. Now she was asking them to prepare for war against an enemy that outnumbered them 10 to 1. "There's something else," Dr. Lane said. "Our industrial capacity." "What about it?" "For 1,000 years we've been building, terraforming planets, constructing space stations, mining asteroids, creating automated factories. We have more manufacturing power than any civilization in known space. If we focused all of that on military production..." He didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone in the room understood what he meant. President Carter made her decision. "General Stone, I'm placing you in charge of our defense. Commander Turner, I want every exploration ship captain to receive emergency tactical training. Dr. Lane, I need you to dust off every military manual we have." "And Protocol 7? General Stone asked. The president was quiet for a long moment. Outside the window, the sun was setting over the peaceful city. Soon parents would call their children home for dinner. Students would finish their homework. Scientists would lock up their laboratories and go home to their families. All of that was about to change. "Activate it," she said. "Send the signal to every human world, every ship, every outpost. Tell them that after 1,000 years of peace, we remember who we are." The message went out within minutes. Across human space, on worlds both old and new, people received the same simple transmission. "Protocol 7 is now active. Prepare for the return of the old ways." On the manufacturing world of New Pittsburgh, factory supervisor Carl Davis watched in amazement as the automated systems began changing themselves. Machines that built homes and schools started producing armor and weapons instead. Assembly lines that made farming equipment switch to military vehicles. The transformation happened so smoothly that it seemed almost alive. On the research station orbiting Jupiter, Dr. Helen Brooks looked at her life's work with new eyes. For 20 years, she had been developing better ways to terraform hostile planets. Her plasma generators could turn frozen worlds into gardens, but now she realized they could also turn enemy ships into debris. Aboard the exploration vessel Star Chaser, Captain Robert Lee received his new orders and felt something stirring in his chest. His great-grandfather had been a soldier in the last days of the resource wars. The old man had told stories about battles in space, about ships fighting among the stars. Robert had thought those were just stories. Now he wondered if they were instructions. Across human space, a civilization that had forgotten war began to remember. Teachers opened history books they had not touched in years. Engineers looked at their peaceful machines and saw weapons. Farmers calculated how much food an army would need. Musicians composed songs to keep soldiers' spirits high. But the most important change happened in the minds of ordinary people. For 1,000 years, humans had been explorers, scientists, artists, and builders. They had been proud of their peaceful ways and their gentle civilization. Now they remembered that their ancestors had been something else entirely. They had been the most dangerous predators ever to evolve on any world. They had fought wars that lasted centuries and built weapons that could crack planets. They had conquered their own world so completely that they finally chose to conquer their own violent nature instead. That choice had made them peaceful. It had not made them weak. The Zorathians were about to learn the difference. Protocol 7 had been sleeping for 1,000 years, but it woke up fast. Across human space, machines that had been building peaceful things for generations suddenly knew how to build weapons of war. It was as if the entire civilization had been waiting for this moment. On New Pittsburgh, factory supervisor Carl Davis could hardly believe what he was seeing. The massive automated plants that covered the planet had been making farming tools and habitat domes just yesterday. Now they were producing armor plating and energy weapons. The machines moved with frightening efficiency, as if they remembered something their human operators had forgotten. "How is this possible?" asked his assistant, Maria Santos, as she watched robotic arms assemble what looked like a missile launcher. Carl checked his computer screen. The manufacturing protocols were built into the system from the beginning. Every machine, every assembly line, every automated factory was designed to switch to military production if needed. Our ancestors planned for this day even while they hoped it would never come. Meanwhile, aboard the exploration vessel Harmony's Edge, Dr. Lisa Parker stared at her research with completely new eyes. For 3 years, she had been studying how to make hostile planets suitable for human life. Her plasma generators could melt ice caps and warm frozen atmospheres. Her weather control systems could create rain on desert worlds. Now she realized that the same technology could be used very differently. "Maya," she called to the ship's engineer, "what would happen if we reversed the polarity on the terraforming plasma array?" Maya Johnson looked up from her own work. She had been modifying the ship's mining lasers for the past week, making them more powerful and accurate. The plasma stream would become incredibly hot and focused. It could cut through almost anything, including enemy ship hulls. Maya grinned. especially enemy ship hulls. Captain Jake Morrison watched his crew transform their peaceful exploration vessel into something that looked increasingly dangerous. Commander Ben Rogers had been studying every piece of information they could find about Zorathian battle tactics. The ship's computer was now filled with attack patterns, defensive formations, and strategic analyses that had been gathering dust in human archives for centuries. "Captain," Ben said, "I've been looking at the historical files. Do you know what humans used to call themselves during the resource wars?" "What?" "The nightmare species. Other races were so afraid of human tactics that they coined that term. We didn't just fight wars. We turned warfare into a science." Jake felt a chill run down his spine. "What kind of science?" Ben brought up files on the main screen. "Psychological warfare, adaptive strategies, total resource mobilization. Humans didn't just try to defeat their enemies. They tried to make their enemies afraid to fight them in the first place." While human space prepared for war, the Zorathian invasion fleet moved steadily closer. War Chief Vexitar commanded 500 ships carrying 2 million warriors. It was the largest military force the Galactic Trade Union had ever assembled. According to their intelligence, they were about to conquer a species that had fewer than 100 lightly armed ships. "How long until we reach the first human world?" Vexitar asked his navigation officer. 12 days, War Chief. The planet they call Haven should be easy to capture. Our scouts report only civilian populations and basic orbital platforms. Vexitar studied the tactical display. Human space looked vulnerable, with colonies scattered across dozens of star systems and no visible military presence. After his encounter with Captain Morrison's ship, he had worried that humans might be stronger than expected. But one lucky victory did not make a species of warriors. "Signal the fleet," he ordered. "We will take Haven first, then move on to the larger colonies. This will be the easiest conquest in Zorathian history." He had no idea how wrong he was. On Earth, retired military historian Colonel Frank Miller had not slept in 3 days. He sat in the archives beneath the Capitol building, surrounded by files that chronicled humanity's bloodiest period. The resource wars had lasted 50 years and killed billions of people. They had also produced the most innovative military minds in known history. General Patricia Stone found him there, reading battle reports by the light of his computer screen. "Frank, you need to rest," she said. He looked up with tired eyes. "Patricia, do you know why the resource wars finally ended?" "Because we learned to work together instead of fighting each other. That's what they teach in schools. But the real reason was simpler. We got so good at killing each other that we scared ourselves. The final battle lasted 6 hours and killed 300 million people. After that, even the most aggressive human generals agreed that war had become too dangerous to continue." General Stone sat down across from him. "What are you trying to tell me?" "The Zorathians think they're facing a peaceful species that has forgotten how to fight, but we never forgot. We just got so good at it that we decided to stop." On the colony world Haven, Administrator Julie Thompson received the Protocol 7 activation notice with confusion and growing alarm. Haven was a farming world with 2 million peaceful settlers. They grew food for other human colonies and had never seen violence worse than an occasional bar fight. Now her computer was telling her to prepare for invasion. "Tom," she called to her security chief, "what kind of defenses do we actually have?" Tom Bradley had been a police officer on Haven for 15 years. His biggest challenge was usually drunk farmers or teenagers joyriding in hover cars. "We have the orbital traffic control platforms and the asteroid monitoring stations. Nothing military." Julie looked at the defensive plans that Protocol 7 had automatically generated. "According to this, we can turn the traffic control platforms into weapon systems and use the asteroid monitors as early warning sensors." "How?" "I don't know, but the computer seems very confident it will work." Across human space, similar conversations were happening on every world and every ship. People who had lived their entire lives in peace were discovering that their civilization had been quietly preparing for war since the day the last war ended. The transformation was not just about weapons and tactics. It was about remembering what humans were capable of when they had to be. Dr. Helen Brooks, working at the Jupiter Research Station, made a discovery that changed everything. While reviewing the terraforming protocols, she found hidden subroutines that had been programmed into every major human system. They were instructions for turning peaceful technology into instruments of war, written by the same people who had survived the resource wars. They knew this day might come, she whispered to herself. They planned for it. The most shocking discovery came when she realized how comprehensive the preparations were. Every human child learned history, strategy, and systems thinking in school. Every engineer understood how machines worked and how they could be modified. Every scientist knew the principles that governed both creation and destruction. For 1,000 years, humanity had been educating a population that could become an army at a moment's notice. They had built an entire civilization that could transform itself for war without losing its essential humanity. The Zorathians were expecting to fight farmers and scientists. Instead, they were about to face something the galaxy had never seen, an entire species that had turned warfare into an art form and then spent centuries perfecting that art in the name of peace. Captain Morrison received his final orders as the enemy fleet approached human space. He was no longer commanding an exploration vessel. The Harmony's edge had become something new, something dangerous. His crew had spent 2 weeks modifying every system on the ship for combat. "Are we ready?" he asked his officers. Dr. Parker nodded. "The biological warfare suite is online. I never thought I'd be designing weapons, but it turns out everything I know about life can be used to destroy it too." Maya checked her weapons display. "All systems modified and tested. We're not an exploration ship anymore, Captain. We're something much worse." Commander Rogers looked up from his tactical station. "The fleet is in position. 47 ships, all converted from exploration vessels. The Zorathians are expecting to find scattered civilians. Instead, they're going to find us." Jake Morrison thought about his peaceful life before Protocol 7. He had been a simple ship captain, exploring new worlds and making peaceful contact with alien species. Now he was preparing to fight a war that would determine the future of human civilization. But as he looked at his crew and thought about the people they were fighting to protect, he realized something important. They were still the same people they had always been. They still believed in peace and exploration, in building rather than destroying. The difference was that now they remembered they were strong enough to protect those beliefs. The Zorathians were about to learn what happened when you threatened something that humans valued. They were about to discover why humanity had once been called the nightmare species, and they were about to understand that some nightmares were real. The Zorathian invasion fleet dropped out of faster-than-light travel at the edge of the Haven system. War Chief Vextar stood on the bridge of his flagship, looking at the tactical display with satisfaction. The human colony world hung in space before them like a ripe fruit waiting to be picked. "Begin the attack," he ordered. "Target the orbital platforms first, then move on to the planet itself." 500 warships moved forward in perfect formation. They had conquered dozens of worlds using the same tactics: overwhelming force, direct assault, quick victory. It had never failed them before. But as they approached the inner system, something felt wrong. "War Chief," his sensor officer called out. "I'm reading unusual energy signatures from the orbital platforms." "What kind of signatures?" "I'm not sure. They look like civilian traffic control stations, but the power readings are much higher than normal." Vextar frowned. "Are they weapons?" "I don't think so. The configuration is all wrong for military hardware." On Haven's orbital traffic control station, Administrator Julie Thompson watched the enemy fleet approach. Her hands were shaking, but her voice was steady as she spoke to the other platform commanders. "Remember what the Protocol 7 manual said. These platforms were designed to be converted in exactly this situation. The computer will handle most of it automatically." Around the planet, 12 orbital platforms that had spent decades guiding cargo ships and passenger transport suddenly became something else entirely. Their traffic control lasers, designed to create safe navigation beams, turned into focused energy weapons. Their powerful radar arrays became targeting systems. Their fusion reactors, built to power civilian operations, now fed energy to weapons that had been hidden in their design for 1,000 years. The first Zorathian ship to enter range was a heavy cruiser commanded by Sub-Chief Krastar. He was an experienced warrior who had led the assault on 6 different worlds. As his ship approached the first orbital platform, he expected to destroy it with a single missile volley. Instead, a beam of energy so bright it hurt to look at struck his ship's forward armor. The beam was not designed as a weapon, but it carried enough power to run a small city. The cruiser's shields collapsed instantly and its hull began to melt. "Evasive action," Krastar shouted, but it was too late. 3 more platforms opened fire, their civilian traffic control systems working together with deadly precision. The heavy cruiser broke apart in seconds. War Chief Vextar watched in shock as his advanced ships encountered something no military strategist had ever planned for. The humans were not using traditional weapons, they were using their own peaceful infrastructure as instruments of war. "How is this possible?" he demanded. His tactical officer studied the readings. "War Chief, those platforms are not military installations. They're civilian traffic control stations, but somehow they've been modified to function as defensive weapons." More Zorathian ships pushed forward, trying to overwhelm the orbital defenses with sheer numbers. But the platforms were coordinated by the same computer systems that had been managing peaceful space traffic for decades. They knew exactly where every ship was, how fast it was moving, and where it would be in the next few seconds. The result was not a battle in any traditional sense. It was more like a traffic control system that had decided to reroute enemy ships into oblivion. On the surface of Haven, farmers and shopkeepers watched the battle through their windows. Many of them had never seen violence worse than a playground fight. But they understood what was happening. Their peaceful world was being defended by the same systems that had kept their lives safe and orderly for generations. "Look at that," said Farmer Pete Johnson, pointing at the sky where explosions marked the death of enemy ships. "Our traffic computers are beating a whole invasion fleet." His neighbor, Sarah Lee, shook her head in amazement. Who knew that the same system that schedules cargo deliveries could fight a war? The orbital battle lasted only 2 hours. When it was over, War Chief Vextar had lost 40 ships and gained nothing. The human platform still controlled the space around Haven, and his fleet had not even reached the planet's surface. But the real shock came when the human counterattack began. Captain Jake Morrison's ship, the Reckoning, appeared at the edge of sensor range along with 46 other converted exploration vessels. They had been watching the battle, studying Zorathian tactics and preparing for their moment to strike. "All ships," Morrison transmitted to the human fleet. "Remember what we learned from the archives. These warriors fight in straight lines and expect their enemies to do the same. We're going to give them something they've never seen before." The human ships moved like a school of fish, weaving through space in patterns that seemed random but were actually carefully coordinated. Each vessel had been modified by its crew according to their specific skills and knowledge. Dr. Parker's HFY Biological Warfare Laboratory ship, Maya's mobile weapons platform, Ben's electronic warfare specialist vessel. Each one unique, each one dangerous in its own way. The Zorathians tried to respond with their traditional tactics. They formed battle lines and charged forward, expecting to overwhelm the smaller human force with superior firepower. But the human ships refused to cooperate with Zorathian expectations. Instead of meeting them head-on, the exploration vessels split apart and attacked from dozens of different angles. They used their superior sensors to stay just out of range of enemy weapons, while their own modified systems found weak spots in Zorathian armor. When the enemy tried to pursue one group, another group would appear from a different direction. Maya, Johnson, now commanding her own heavily modified ship, found herself facing 3 Zorathian destroyers. Her vessel had once been designed to study asteroid compositions. Now it fired concentrated mining beams that could cut through ship hulls like a knife through paper. "This is for all the peaceful traders you killed," she whispered as her beams found their targets. Dr. Lisa Parker's converted laboratory ship deployed something that had never been used in space combat before. Her biological warfare systems released clouds of engineered bacteria that attacked the metal components of enemy ships. The Zorathian vessels began to fall apart from the inside as their own hulls were eaten away by microscopic organisms. "Commander, Ben Rogers coordinated the electronic warfare assault. His ship's sensors, designed to study distant galaxies, now jammed Zorathian communications and navigation systems. Enemy ships found themselves flying blind, unable to coordinate with their allies or even know where they were. War Chief Vextar watched his organized fleet dissolve into chaos. Ships collided with each other as their navigation failed. Weapons misfired or refused to work at all. Hull plating began to corrode and fall away, and through it all, the human ships danced around them like ghosts, striking where they were weak and vanishing before they could respond. "This is impossible," he roared. "They're scientists and explorers. How are they defeating trained warriors?" His tactical officer, studying the battle data, had found the answer. "War Chief, they're not fighting like warriors. They're fighting like engineers solving a problem. Every attack is calculated, every movement is planned. They're treating this battle like a complex, technical challenge." The realization hit Vextar like a physical blow. His warriors were brave and strong, but they fought the same way their ancestors had fought for thousands of years. The humans were doing something completely different. They had taken warfare and turned it into a science. As his fleet continued to fall apart around him, Vextar began to understand what he was really fighting. These were not the soft, peaceful creatures his intelligence had described. These were the descendants of the species that had once turned an entire planet into a battlefield, and then had the wisdom to stop fighting each other. They had not forgotten how to make war. They had just gotten better at it. The battle for Haven ended when the surviving Zorathian ships tried to retreat. But the human vessels, coordinated by communication systems designed for deep space exploration, had surrounded them completely. Every escape route was blocked by ships that seemed to know exactly where the enemy would try to run. Vextar found himself trapped in the center of a formation that moved like a living thing. The human ships maintained perfect distance, always, just close enough to strike but too far away to be effectively attacked in return. Then Captain Morrison's voice came over the communication system, calm and measured. "War Chief Vextar, this is Captain Morrison of the human vessel Reckoning. You are surrounded and outmatched. Surrender now, and we can discuss the terms of your withdrawal from human space." Vextar looked around at the wreckage of his invasion fleet. Of the 500 ships he had brought to conquer humanity, fewer than 100 remained operational, and those were only alive because the humans had chosen to let them live. For the first time in his long career as a warrior, War Chief Vextar realized he had made a terrible mistake. He had not attacked a weak species of peaceful farmers. He had attacked something far more dangerous. He had attacked humans who remembered what they were capable of. War Chief Vextar stood on the bridge of his damaged flagship, surrounded by human vessels that could destroy him in seconds, but chose not to. His proud invasion fleet was now just scattered wreckage floating in space. The warriors who had followed him expected either glorious victory or honorable death. Instead, they faced something no Zorathian had ever experienced before: defeat followed by mercy. Captain Morrison's voice came through the communication system, calm and patient. "War Chief, we need to talk. I'm sending coordinates for a meeting. Place. Come alone and bring no weapons." Vextar's officers looked at him with confusion. In Zorathian culture, defeated enemies were either killed or enslaved. The idea of negotiation after total defeat made no sense to them. "It could be a trap, War Chief," his tactical officer warned. Vextar looked at the tactical display showing the human ships in perfect formation around his fleet. "If they wanted to kill us, we would already be dead. I will hear what they have to say." The meeting took place on Haven's main orbital station, the same platform that had helped destroy his advanced ships. Vextar walked through corridors that looked completely normal. No military decorations, no weapons displays, just the kind of peaceful civilian areas he might find on any trading station. It was hard to believe this place had just fought off an invasion fleet. President Ellen Carter had traveled from Earth to attend the meeting personally. She sat at a simple conference table along with General Patricia Stone, Dr. Richard Lane, and Captain Morrison. There were no guards, no show of force, just 5 humans who looked like they could be teachers or shopkeepers. Vextar took the offered seat across from them, his warrior's instincts screaming that this was all wrong. Victorious enemies should be celebrating, not sitting quietly like they were about to discuss a business contract. War Chief Vextar, President Carter said, "Thank you for coming. Before we begin, I want you to understand something important. We don't want to be your enemies." Vextar's translator struggled with the concept. "You have defeated my fleet. In Zorathian culture, that makes you our conquerors." "In human culture," General Stone replied, "that makes us people who had to defend themselves. There's a difference." Dr. Lane activated a holographic display that showed images from human history. Vextar saw battles in space, planets burning, massive fleets destroying each other in conflicts that lasted for decades. "These are scenes from our resource wars," Dr. Lane explained. "For 50 years, humans fought each other with weapons that could crack planets and strategies that could break civilizations. We became very good at destroying things." The images changed to show the final battle of the resource wars. Vexitar watched in horrified fascination, as human fleets tore each other apart with weapons that made his own seem primitive by comparison. "In 6 hours, we killed 300 million of our own people," Dr. Lane continued. "After that battle, even our most aggressive leaders realized that we had become too dangerous to fight each other. So you became weak," Vextar said, trying to understand. President Carter shook her head. "No, we became wise. We chose to turn our skills toward creation instead of destruction. But we never forgot what we were capable of." Captain Morrison leaned forward. "War Chief, your intelligence was wrong about us. We haven't been living in peace because we're soft. We've been living in peace because we're strong enough to choose it." The holographic display showed human colonies, space stations, and terraforming projects. Vextar saw worlds transformed from barren rock into garden paradises, massive structures built in the vacuum of space, and technology that could reshape reality itself. "Everything you saw in our battle," General Stone explained, "we built during our 1,000 years of peace. Our traffic control systems, our mining equipment, our research stations, all of it can become military hardware because we designed it that way. We prepared for war while hoping it would never come." Vextar studied the images with growing understanding. "You have been planning for this day for 1,000 years. Not planning," Dr. Lane corrected. "Preparing. There's a difference. Planning means you expect something to happen. Preparing means you're ready if it does." President Carter changed the display to show a map of Zorathian space. Vextar recognized his home worlds, the conquered territories, the military bases that supported his empire. "We know about your people, War Chief," she said. "You're warriors because your worlds are harsh and resources are scarce. You conquer other species because it's the only way you know how to survive. That is the Zorathian way," Vextar agreed. "It doesn't have to be." The display showed new images. Zorathian worlds transformed by human terraforming technology. Deserts became forests. Frozen planets became warm and green, and barren moons became fertile farmland. "We could help you," President Carter said simply. "Our technology could give your people new worlds to live on without taking them from others. Our knowledge could help you build instead of destroy." Vextar stared at the images. In his entire life, he had never seen anything like it. Zorathian worlds were places of constant struggle where only the strong survived. The idea of abundant resources, of planets that could support billions of people in comfort, was almost beyond his comprehension. "Why would you help us?" he asked. "We came here to conquer you." "Because," Captain Morrison said, "helping you cost us less than fighting you. And because we remember what it was like to solve our problems with violence. We don't want other species to make the same mistakes we did." General Stone activated another display showing the current military situation. "War Chief, we could destroy your remaining fleet right now. We could track down your home worlds and end the Zorathian Empire in a matter of weeks. Our technology is centuries ahead of yours, and our strategic thinking has had 1,000 years to evolve. But we won't," President Carter continued, "because that would make us the same as the people we used to be. Instead, we're offering you a choice." The choice was simple, but revolutionary. The Zorathians could continue their aggressive expansion and face the full might of human civilization, or they could join something completely new, an alliance based on cooperation instead of conquest. Vextar listened as the humans explained their proposal. The Galactic Trade Union would become the Galactic Development Alliance. Instead of taking resources from weaker species, they would help develop new worlds. Instead of building weapons, they would build homes. Instead of spreading through conquest, they would spread through invitation. Your people are warriors, General Stone acknowledged. That doesn't have to change. But instead of fighting each other, you could fight the real enemies: disease, hunger, the hostility of space itself. Those are battles worth winning. The meeting lasted for hours as Vexitar asked questions and the humans patiently answered them. They showed him detailed plans for transforming Zorathian society, projections of what their worlds could become, and examples of other species who had already chosen cooperation over conflict. Finally, Vexitar had to ask the question that had been bothering him since the battle ended. If you are so powerful, why did you let us attack you at all? You could have destroyed our fleet before it reached your space. President Carter smiled sadly. Because we hoped you would be smart enough to turn back on your own. We always hope that violence won't be necessary. Sometimes we're wrong. When the meeting ended, Vextar returned to his ship with a choice to make. He could recommend that the Zorathian Empire continue its war against humanity, knowing it would mean the end of his people. Or he could do something that no war chief had ever done before: choose peace over glory. 3 months later, the transformation was complete. The Zorathian war chief had become Ambassador Vextar, working with human engineers to turn his people's military worlds into centers of learning and development. The other species in the former trade union had followed his example, choosing prosperity over conquest. On his homeworld of Zorath Prime, Vextar stood in what had once been a military command center and was now a terraforming research facility. Through the windows he could see green plants growing in soil that had been barren desert just weeks before. His son, a young warrior who had expected to spend his life fighting, now worked alongside human scientists to develop better ways of creating livable worlds. The weapons that had once threatened to destroy civilizations now powered the tools that built them. Captain Morrison visited the facility as part of his new assignment. The Harmony's Edge had been converted back to an exploration vessel, but now it carried mixed crews of humans and former enemies working together to map new regions of space. Any regrets? Morrison asked, as they watched the sunset over the transformed landscape. Vextar thought about the question seriously. I regret that it took a war to teach us this lesson, but I do not regret learning it. As they talked, a message arrived from the Outer Rim. Exploration teams had made contact with a new species, one that seemed aggressive and territorial. The message asked for guidance on how to handle the situation. Morrison smiled as he composed his response. Humanity had learned that true strength wasn't the ability to destroy your enemies. It was the wisdom to turn them into allies. And now they had the chance to teach that lesson to others. The galaxy was a big place, full of species that still believed strength